The fire is small, deliberate, just large enough. He built it that way, not too high, not too exposed. A man who wastes heat in the mountains is a man who doesn't come home. And this man is dying. He doesn't know it yet. He moves through the snow with an economy of motion that only comes from years. Each step is placed. Each breath is measured. The wind cuts across the ridge, and he turns into it, reads it the way a sailor reads water. His traps are set in the right places, along the creek line, beneath the spruce overhang, in the corridors where small animals move when the cold gets serious. By every measure, this man is doing everything right. His camp is clean. His fire holds. His traps are full. And none of it is enough. In the winter of 1906, Arctic explorer Vilhjalmur Stefansson made an observation that would quietly unsettle the entire logic of wilderness survival. Stefansson was not a romantic. He was a scientist, methodical, skeptical, the kind of man who tested assumptions rather than inherited them. And what he documented in the Arctic, after living alongside Inuit hunters and later conducting controlled experiments on his own body, was this. A man eating nothing but lean meat will begin to deteriorate within days. Not slowly. Days. Weakness, headache, and a creeping nausea that worsens with every meal. He called it, precisely and without drama, protein poisoning. But Stefansson was writing in the 20th century. The men dying in the fur trade wilderness of the 1800s had no such vocabulary. What they had were journals, letters, entries that stopped mid-sentence. Men found in camp, not skeletal, not visibly starved, but weakened in ways no one could explain cleanly. They had food. Some had abundant food. Their traps were working, and still, something was quietly draining out of them. No one had a clean answer. The cold was blamed. Exhaustion. The mountain, as if the mountain had chosen them. But the mountain hadn't chosen them. Something far more precise had. In deep winter, the frontier wilderness was not a pantry. It was a vault. Large game had moved. Elk, deer, bison following grass and elevation along routes that rarely intersected a lone trapper's camp. The forest in January offered almost nothing, except for one thing, the snowshoe hare, Lepus americanus. In a good cycle year, they were everywhere, beneath every thicket, along every stream bank, their tracks pressed into the snow in the thousands. Easy to snare, catchable by almost anyone with patience and a length of cord. To a man alone in the mountains in January, the rabbit wasn't just food, it was salvation. The logic was airtight. You needed calories. The rabbit provided calories, and the land was full of them. Men built entire winter strategies around this. They had done it before. It had worked before. The trap looked exactly like a gift. It was a gift right up until it wasn't. Here is what no one told them. Here is what the journals couldn't explain. Here is the thing that changes everything you just heard. Protein cannot sustain the human body on its own. Not because it lacks energy, it has energy, but because the human liver, when confronted with pure protein and no fat, begins a process it was never designed to run at full capacity indefinitely. It works to convert that protein into usable fuel, and that conversion costs the body more than it gains. The man eating rabbits is not getting stronger. He is running a deficit with every meal. But here is the part that makes it monstrous. He doesn't feel it. He feels full. His appetite responds. He eats more because his body is screaming for something, though it cannot name what. And eating more accelerates the process. The hunger doesn't come from his stomach being empty. It comes from his cells, starving at a level his mind cannot perceive. He is full. He is starving. Both things are true at the same moment. In some cases, eating more of the very thing supposedly keeping him alive only pushed him closer to death. His body is consuming its own tissue to process the food he's giving it. His liver floods. His muscles weaken before his appetite does. He begins to feel, perhaps, that the cold is getting worse, that he is sleeping more, that the work of camp, which was never hard for him, is somehow harder now. He doesn't suspect the rabbit. The rabbit is the reason he's still alive. He is certain of this. He is wrong. And the wrongness is invisible. That is what makes it lethal. There were people for whom this was never a mystery, and what they knew was stranger and more precise than most people today are prepared to hear. Indigenous hunters across the northern wilderness had understood fat not as a luxury, but as the primary nutritional target of a winter hunt. Not the muscle meat, the fat. And this wasn't a preference, it was survival calculus, arrived at over generations and encoded with the kind of exactness that only comes from getting it wrong and paying the price. Here is the detail that stops most people cold. Experienced hunters would sometimes discard lean meat entirely if no fat source were available. Not reluctantly, deliberately. Because they understood, through generations of hard, observed knowledge, that lean meat eaten in isolation didn't just fail to nourish. It accelerated deterioration. It was, in the most functional sense of the word, toxic in isolation. A pound of rendered fat was worth more than 10 pounds of lean meat, not as a preference, as a biological fact. When a caribou or moose was taken in winter, the femur was cracked open immediately. The rich marrow extracted and consumed first. The brain, the liver, the kidney. These weren't eaten out of desperation. They were eaten first because generations of observation had established that organ meats carried what muscle tissue fundamentally lacked. Bone broth wasn't comfort food. It was portable fat and collagen, a survival technology. And the ratio mattered. The fat-to-protein balance in a winter diet wasn't ideal. It was calibrated. The pemmican carried on long journeys, dried meat combined with rendered fat, often in roughly equal parts by caloric weight, wasn't a recipe. It was a precise answer to a precise biological problem. The lean meat was almost incidental. The fat was the food. To the modern eye, shaped by decades of low-fat dietary culture, this inverts everything. The thing we were told to avoid was the thing keeping men alive. The thing we were told was sufficient, clean, lean protein, was the thing that, in isolation, quietly ended them. The mountain men who died were not weak. They were not careless. They were operating on an almost correct map. And almost correct is the most dangerous kind of wrong there is, because it never triggers the alarm. It works just often enough to feel like it works. It is supported by logic. It is confirmed by short-term experience. It asks nothing of you except your trust. And so they trusted it. They feared bears. They feared blizzards, avalanches, ambush, and the river in snowmelt. They cataloged the known dangers, and they prepared for them with skill and seriousness. In the wilderness, starvation wasn't always the absence of food. Sometimes it was the inability to recognize what food really was. The body kept a more honest ledger than the mind. It knew the difference between eating and being fed. It sent signals the dying men couldn't read, because nothing in their experience had taught them the language. The mountain men feared bears, blizzards, and the reach of a bitter winter. Yet their deadliest enemy sat quietly beside the fire every night, disguised as survival.